question. That's fine. Okay. But the question we have the microphones. Okay.
Yeah.
That'd be fine.
Would we be able to suggest that to the crowd?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Okay, time is on us right now. And to begin, we'll call up our provost to the podium to provide welcomes from Texas Southern University.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. It's great to have this crowd here this evening. On behalf of our president, Dr. Austin Lane, I would like to say thank you for joining us for this speaker series. It's great to have this exciting speaker that we will be enjoying this afternoon. And I've always wanted to refer to him as ambassador because I want to know which one pays more, ambassador or secretary of state. So this is neither, okay. But we do have Assistant Secretary of State Tibor Nagy here with us this evening, and he has had a very intriguing foreign affairs career, and I know one of our students is going to introduce him, so I don't want to steal none of that thunder. But at the same time, his foreign relations really is quite timing for Texas Southern University and his talking to here, and the fact that we're forming better relationships with more of our more countries around the world, including those within Africa. I just returned from a trip from Equatorial Guinea. There he is. How you going, Commissioner? From Equatorial Guinea, and where we're forming a partnership with them, Texas Southern Universities, and with other partnerships around the world. I was just speaking with another friend of the university, Miss Tava Banks, and she wanted to come and talk to us about having a foreign diplomat program starting here at Texas Southern so that we can grow more Secretary Nagy's right here at Texas Southern University. So it is great timing to have him to come talk to us, to act as the catalyst to kick this whole aspect of Texas Southern to the world. Is what we want to look at it as, our community. If you look at Texas Southern University, it has a special designation as being one that should involve its community. But our community has just grown so far than just Third Ward, Texas, so far than just Houston, Texas, so far than just the city of within a great state of Texas, to be more of a global perspective. So our community has gotten so much larger than just Third Ward, Texas, due to the information technology, the way that it's spread, the way that we're able to communicate to one another. So on behalf of our president, who sends his hellos, as well as he hopes that everyone enjoys this evening, we had a very long conversation right before I walked in, and he said, man, I had called out to another event, but he wanted to be here. But for sure, I know we will be excited to have our speaker and hear what he has to say for us today. And Dean Harrington asked me, are you staying or are you going to scoot away? I said, no, this one I actually want to stay and listen to. So this is a great opportunity for us here at Texas Southern. So I think we will have a student come up, Dean, now to introduce the secretary. Okay.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Provost. Our dean will come to the podium very quickly and welcome you on behalf of Barbara Jordan Michelin School of Public Affairs here at the McCoy Auditorium. And after our dean, we will have Nika and Dula and our student Deandra and then the, what you do these pieces.
Sure. Well, it's a pleasure on my part to welcome you to the Barbara Jordan McAlealan School of Public Affairs. On behalf of our students, faculty, and staff, it's my honor to welcome you. And particularly, I want to note that the Barbara Jordan McAlealan School of Public Affairs houses the McAlealan Center for World Peace and Hunger. And this is a very interesting year in terms of what we will be commemorating. We will be commemorating the 30th year of the Congressman's death on August 7th. And when we understand that Secretary Nagy was familiar and knew the Congressman. And we will also be marking the 75th year, November 27th, of the McAlealan's birth, 27th. The importance of the Leland Center, of course, is that we prepare our students to be global citizens that will go out with respect, understanding, appreciation, and acceptance, and make their mark in the world. So again, on the behalf of the Barbara Jordan McAlealan School of Public Affairs and the McAlealan Center for World Hunger and Peace, it is a pleasure to welcome all of the visitors, students, and others who are here this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my Dean whom I've served on 2 occasions. Thank you very much. If I can call up to the podium Nika, Dula, and Deandra at the same time, if I can. And the reason, also Nicole, just briefly, I know you, Nicole, where's Dula? Come on, quickly. It's really important to acknowledge when we collaborate, because one of the strategic goals of Texas Southern is our collaborative effort. And this collaborative effort took place by a phone call and a visit. Started with Dula. We met Nicole Peacock, met Nika, and then my student Deandra. We even went through the government shutdown. We kept going anyway. We kept meeting and going, and we brought it here today. So if I could allow Nika and Dula to say a couple words, and then Deandra will welcome on behalf of the students, and she'll bring up the ambassador.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ambassador Nagy, for being here today. We really appreciate your passion and dedication to Africa. For 32 years, you have traveled extensively through Africa and gotten to know our culture, our food, and our heritage. It's great to see someone with so much appreciation for the African and African American culture. Thank you for allowing us to facilitate this discussion. I wanted to thank Dr. Rodriguez for all the work, and Mr. Dula Abdu for everything that has been done so far. Thank you so much. My name is Nika Chapu, and I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Bilateral African Chamber of Commerce, an organization based here in Houston. I wanted to share, before we start, a few facts on the African diaspora and here in Houston. Houston is home to over 95,000 people that were born in Africa. The biggest African communities are represented by Nigeria, Ghana, Ethiopia, Kenya, and South Africa. We also have representation from Equatorial Guinea, Sierra Leone, Burundi, Tanzania, and many other countries that are African. Members of the African diaspora hold degrees in high demands in fields such as science, technology, engineering, and math, all qualities that we have in institutions here in Houston, all skills that we need in Africa, and all qualities that Texas University has to offer to students. The African diaspora here in Houston is also very well represented in vital sectors such as healthcare. The Texas Medical Center is home to many diaspora physicians, nurses that go back to various countries in Africa to provide assistance. Nigerians, Ethiopians, Haitians go often in medical missions to rebuild the healthcare sectors. We cannot ignore the oil and gas community that brings together the relationship between Texas and Angola, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, and Ghana. The LNG sector, Mozambique. 40 Houston firms operate 178 subsidiary locations in Africa. We also have several companies that are based in 23 African countries that represent Houston. Luanda, Angola is Houston's sister city. The African diaspora here in Texas also holds $4.7 billion in spending powers in the state of Texas, and has paid $1.6 in taxes. I also wanted to take a moment to recognize State Representative Ron Reynolds, who is a former TSU graduate, for recognizing the contribution of the African diaspora to the state of Texas. I mention all these numbers to illustrate the strength, the potential to really create an environment of growth and development between U.S. and Africa, starting from here in Houston, Texas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to cover 3 topics. We're supposed to have a video presentation in regard access to technology in Africa, but we had a technical problem. So I'm just going to briefly tell you what the technology is supposed to do. We have a booth, a table outside. If you get a chance, please visit the booth. It is a box. It contains all the educational resources available in the Western world. We put it in a box, so you can drop it anywhere in Africa, in high school, elementary school. Without the internet, students can access it. We want to level the playing field for the children of Africa, and that is critical, because technology is a critical resource for economic development. And one of the reasons that Africa is behind is it's not leveraging technology. So our focus is, if we can do that, I'm hoping the ambassador will be the tool to facilitate access to technology. He has been very passionate about it. He's been fighting for it. So the reason that we put together is to showcase this product at his behest. The other thing I want to mention is that what TSU means to us, or Mikililand means to us, to Ethiopians in particular. You know, TSU has Barbara Jordan, Mikililand, Thurgood Marshall. This is a great institution, iconic people. No institution can claim such iconic names. And we should be very proud of that. And I want every student here to carry the torch of Mikililand and Barbara Jordan. Take the risk. Take the risk. Mikililand took too many risks, and he survived. And you have to live his dreams. And I hope you do that. We want to see one Mikililand every year, or one Barbara Jordan every year. We need to do that. You have to aspire to be that. Okay? The last point I want to make is that I want to quote John F. Kennedy. I think he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Now, don't ask what Ambassador Nagy can do for Africa or for Ethiopia, but what you can do to help him help Africa. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Deandra Durham. I'm an undergraduate research assistant for Dr. Rodriguez. And on behalf of the Mickey Leland Center on Poverty, Peace, and World Hunger, we would like to extend a most gracious welcome to Ambassador Nagy and his team. Without further delay, we welcome you to the stage.
Good evening, everybody. I feel like I'm on hallowed ground with the connection between Texas Southern and Congressman Mickey Leland. I had the honor to work with him in Ethiopia on several occasions because he visited during the Great Famine of between 84 and 86. We had about 137 members of Congress visit, and it's quickly apparent to those of us who were there who was coming because of their commitment and who was coming for politics. I know it's shocking to you that some of those people might have been coming for politics, but I can assure you that Congressman Leland was the most committed, not only for the starving people of Ethiopia, but also for refugees. And for me, that is especially significant because I came to the United States as a refugee. I'm the only U.S. ambassador to have ever spent time in a refugee camp as a refugee and not as a visitor. So wherever I worked, I made it a point to visit every single refugee camp that I could, because it's quite a shock to the refugees to see the big car show up with the American flag, and the ambassador steps out, and I could say, look them in the eye and say, you don't always have to be like that. You don't always have to be like that. I also want to congratulate your university for your partnership with Equatorial Guinea. I am embarrassed to admit that when I worked at Texas Tech before returning to the State Department, I tried doing a partnership with Equatorial Guinea and I failed. So congratulations to you. I think it's a wonderful initiative, and I hope you make really good use out of it, because Equatorial Guinea is a most interesting country, and they're a rich country, so they can certainly pay for their part of the partnership. I like to, tonight, I'll speak briefly. I want to talk a little bit about Africa. Then I want to talk about careers in diplomacy, because I would very much want to entice some of you into taking the kind of career that I took. And then after that, the most important part is I want to hear from you, because I want to talk about stuff that's interesting to you, not interesting to me. So I think, is somebody going to be walking around with questions, or? Yeah, so we'll make sure, because that's what I'm really here for. I like to tell my audiences that I am Hungarian by birth. I am now American by citizenship, but my heart is definitely African. I spent 22 years on the continent, and when I say the continent, I only talk about one continent. 8 different countries. My kids were born there. They were the first triplets born in independent Zimbabwe. President Mugabe was not happy, and he even recently, when I met with President Mnangagwa, he said, "Oh, I want to give your kids citizenship in Zimbabwe." I may take him up on it. We'll see what happens. And they raised there. They also fell in love with Africa, and a couple of them have returned to service in Africa. It took me about 2 days, I think, to fall in love with Africa, and that love has continued now for decades and decades and decades. As I like to tell people who have not visited Africa and just try to give them a sense of it, I say, yes, in many respects, it's still a poor continent. We'll try to change that. It's still a poor continent for the people. They may not have watches, but they have all the time in the world for you. It's the only continent I can say that. One thing's for sure, the 21st century is going to be Africa century, for good or ill. For good or ill. And the things that we do now, policy-wise, the rest of the world is going to decide what direction that goes in. I'll tell you an example. When I was in Nigeria in 2016, I had a meeting with the governor of Borno State. Borno is where all those horrendous things are happening by Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa. And I was just talking to him, very impressive gentleman, and he said, Ambassador, people realize that the population of Africa is going to double between now and 2050. Just think about that. Population of the whole continent is going to double between now and 2050. But very few people realize that most of that population growth is going to take place in this part of Africa, what we call the Sahel, which is the area that has the lowest levels of education, the lowest number of opportunities for the people who live there, and the fewest rights for women. There are going to be millions and millions and millions of young Africans born and growing up there. And I was so depressed. I went home that night and I could not sleep. But then the next day, something else happened. I had an opportunity to meet the returning Mandela Fellows from Nigeria, Young African Leaders Initiative, Mandela Fellows, which brings over young Africans, leaders in various fields to attend our universities for 6 weeks. I was talking to them. They were telling me about their experiences. And as we were talking, a thought entered my mind. I said, oh my gosh, never in my entire life have I met a sharper group of young people anywhere. Not in Africa, not in Europe, not in America, anywhere. And then I was thinking, wow. So here's two scenarios. The governor's scenario. Millions and millions and millions of young Africans without opportunities who would be open to radicalization. They can't find jobs. They suffer from bad governments. And so the ranks of Boko Haram, ISIS West Africa are going to swell, and millions of young Africans are going to take off on that tortuous road trying to migrate to Europe. Instability. Threats, not just to Europe, but to the United States of America. Scenario B, the most dynamic, entrepreneurial, forward-moving, economic powerhouse developing for the millions and millions of young Africans who can use their energy to advance their countries and their continents. As I said, the decisions and the policies we make now are going to determine those two futures. I call it a youth tsunami. And what the youth tsunami will need more than anything else are jobs. Because those young Africans, it's not the world anymore where there's no communication. Those young folks have the same information that you all do. And they, guess what? They have the same dreams that you guys do. Good job, good house, be able to support their families, a little bit left over. And if they don't get it, the level of frustration is going to be incredible. So we have to get those jobs. And how do we do that? That is my goal number one for whatever time God gives me in this position, because I'm going to do everything possible to help Africa succeed. Now, recently in December, we issued a new Africa strategy. And I love it because it's very much in line with what I truly believe in. Because I've been following Africa since I landed in Lusaka in 1978. And I know we've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on development assistance. The only problem out of all of that is Africa has not really developed. We're always talking about developing. We need to get to the point where it's developed. And I'll tell you something else. There's not enough money in the world, development assistance, to make it develop. However, there is good news, because there is something called foreign direct investment. And there's billions and billions and billions of dollars of foreign direct investment by the large companies in America and Europe looking for a place to invest. So that's my strategy number one, and that's what the U.S. government strategy says now, is dramatically increase U.S. trade and investment with Africa. So how do we do that? I'm not President Xi of China. President Xi can order this company, this company, this company. You go to Gabon, you go to Gambia, you go to Botswana and invest. I can't do that. I can encourage companies to go to Africa. And believe me, these companies are, I know from experience, they're looking for places to go. But I can entice them to Africa if the African governments will put in place what I call an investor-friendly environment. And that's what I'm doing actively. We now, in the United States of America, have a very systematic, focused, active campaign to make our U.S. embassies work, engage with their host governments to put in place kind of environment that will welcome U.S. business. And here's the neat thing about that. Because under that umbrella of putting in a good investment climate, we can put all of the values that the United States of America has been pursuing. What does a good business environment mean? Level playing field, so the American company has the same chance as a Chinese company. Means contracts sanctity, so when you sign a contract, people abide by it. It means equal justice, so it's not the president's nephew that wins every case or the person who pays the most bribe. Means good governance, because American companies want to see good governance. They can't pay bribes like other companies can. And it also means human rights, because American companies like environments where human rights exist and where women are empowered, because American companies apply those equal laws. So that's very, very important. In addition to that, you know, when I say I don't like development assistance, there's another type of assistance which I do like, and that's humanitarian. The Chinese have been eating our lunch all over Africa, unfortunately. They're getting all the contracts. We have done an awful job, we the United States of America, at our public relations. Here, I'll give you an example. This is what drives me nuts. The Chinese build a stadium, and they get tremendous, tremendous newspaper coverage out of it. Wow, they built a stadium. What nobody pays attention to is that that stadium would stay empty because it's the United States of America that has paid billions of dollars to treat Africans who suffer from HIV/AIDS and keep them from dying. Uganda alone, we pay $660 million a year supporting their health sector to keep 1.2 million Ugandans alive. South Africa, it's even more, because we are keeping 4.6 million South Africans alive. So the Chinese get away with building a stadium and they give nothing to the health sector. We pay $660 million in Uganda alone and we get no publicity out of it. Well, we're going to change that. We're absolutely going to change that. And when I've been now, since I've been on the job, a little bit less than a year, I visited 15 countries all over. We're going to hit Southern Africa next. And I do a lot of newspaper interviews and TV interviews, and I make the Chinese mad. Oh, I make them mad. The last time I was in Uganda and I raised these points, the Chinese ambassador wrote a scathing editorial. So I know I'm pushing their buttons, and I'm going to keep pushing their buttons. Because here's another thing. American companies hire Africans. Chinese companies bring to Africa anybody who's above the role of turning a shovel. So they're not hiring Africans, they bring the Chinese with them, and then they bring Chinese mom and pop shops that put out of business the African shops. And they screw up the environment, and elephants and rhinos start disappearing as the ivory makes its way to China. And they do a lot of debt, so these African countries, in effect, are getting colonized all over again. Bad enough that they were colonized in the first place. Now they're getting colonized all over again and owe billions and billions of dollars to China. So I'm going to do my best to put a stop to that. Now, thank you, sir. Now I have to say I can't totally blame the Africans or the Chinese, because for a long time, when the knock on the door of investment happened and the Africans opened the door, the only person standing there was the Chinese investor. So what are they supposed to do? My job is to make sure the next time there's a knock on the door, there's an American investor standing there as well. So basically that's my challenge, but I'm going to challenge you all, because Africa also needs you. My current boss, Secretary Pompeo, great guy from Kansas, he is a true believer in making the foreign service, the diplomatic service of the United States, look like America. And that's you guys, because you look like America. He believes totally in diversity, gender, diversity, ethnicity, diversity of geography. He's not just talking the talk. He wants that to happen. So I'm going to plant a seed in your minds, because I really, really want you to consider doing the type of job I'm doing. Now, when I came to the country, I didn't speak a word of English. We were about as poor can get. And I did not let that stop me. I had a high school counselor that, I wasn't the world's greatest academician. I had a high school counselor that told me, you're going to do okay, but don't expect any spectacular things out of life. Maybe some of you have had the same experience. I don't know. But there's two ways you can react to that. You can take it personally and feel crushed and give up, or you can basically say some pretty colorful words in your head, if not to them, and say, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do something. So first thing I'm going to tell you all is give up any limitation. Give up any thought of limitation of yourself. Because in the Department of State, we have all kinds of jobs. You think it's only for political science majors or history majors? No, it is not. It's any kind of major you have. And we have security officer jobs, we have medical jobs, we have technical jobs, we have diplomacy, which, I happen to do, but so many different things. And the way to find out what kind of jobs we have, very easy. You go to a website, it's careers.state.gov. careers.state.gov. And I'll tell you why I dreamt of becoming a diplomat. Because in this day and age, there are not many jobs which really make a difference in the world. And when I got into this deal, I really, really wanted to make a difference. I did not want the kind of a job where the high point of the week is finding a parking place that's a little bit closer. I did not want my grand achievement of my career to be getting an office that's a little bit bigger. I never wanted to, and you all haven't gotten into the workforce yet. You'll figure out what I'm talking about. I did not want the kind of a job, which unfortunately a lot of people have, where they work the whole week just looking forward to the weekend, and all weekend long they dread having to go back to work Monday. I never ever had a day like that. I never had a day when I regretted being in the State Department, and I had so many days when I literally felt like I was in physical contact with history. So look up that website, and not only are there jobs, but there are internships at embassies. There are also special recruitment programs to diversify the Foreign Service. My colleague, Chuka Sike, phenomenal diplomat. He came through such a program, so if you want some more information about that, he can tell you about it. But if you put the two together, you can make a real difference. Because, a lot of people love working in London and Paris, and, the most difficult choice they have to make over a weekend is what museum to visit or which one of 32 different cheeses to buy. And in Africa we don't always have that, but we can make a real difference. I've sat with presidents of countries talking about what kind of policies they should do to improve the lives of their people. I got to work on helping make peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Experience after experience after experience that makes a real difference. So if you have a calling in your heart that you really want to improve the world, think about this as a career. Think about this as a career. And don't let anybody keep you from pursuing that kind of a dream. I would also urge you, and I don't care, if you don't want to go into international work, that's perfectly fine. But don't limit yourself to Houston. I love Houston, great city. Maybe I'll come back to live here sometime. But don't limit yourself to Houston. Think beyond Houston. Think beyond Texas. and dare I say, do think beyond the United States. Because I'll tell you what, especially those of you all that haven't yet graduated and gone out looking for jobs, your competition is not other folks from Houston. It's not folks from Dallas. It's not folks from Lubbock, from New York. It's folks from China and India and Nigeria and Hungary. Because these days, every single person needs to be globally competent and globally competitive with those other folks. Now, I'm old, and when I was going through school, I probably could have done with a high school degree. But these days, you absolutely, absolutely have to have, at a minimum, that bachelor's degree. So, I know some of you, as you pursue that degree, you're going to run into problems and challenges and reasons to quit. But don't do it. It took me 6.5 years to get my 4-year degree, because I worked my way through school, because my family didn't have money to pay for it. But, I don't care if it took that long, because it was worth doing it. I got my degree at Texas Tech, not at Harvard, not at Yale, and I'll tell you what, when I first got in the diplomatic service, my colleagues, at the time when I came in 1978, you know how they defined diversity? It was a white male who did not come from an Ivy League school. Things have changed, thank God. But my folks that I came in with, they say, oh, you came from Texas Tech. What's this Texas Tech? Because they were Harvard, Yale, Princeton. But I'll tell you something, in the group that I came in with, thank God for Texas Tech. I was the first one to become deputy ambassador, first one to become an ambassador. So the laugh is on them. So before I stop, I'll just close with, I love African proverbs. They become part of me. So I'll close with this one, because it has a lot of meaning. There are no shortcuts to the top of the palm tree. There are no shortcuts to the top of the palm tree. Do not give up on your dream, and do not quit under any circumstances. God bless you, and thank you very much. We'll respond to.
There are some questions here. Okay. If you have any questions you brought to you've written in, please raise the question. We collect it. If you have and we'll also bring the mics to you. Daniel and Mark, collect the questions, please. That's right. Yes.
That's done. Yeah. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Harmony Bob Gambuton from the erstwhile British Southern Cameroon that you never had an opportunity to visit when you were in Cameroon.
Not the last time.
Okay. I thank God for that. I am an asylum applicant. I'm not even a refugee yet. This is my question. The United States' interest in energy security in the Gulf of Guinea is inseparable from the stability of the Gulf region. Does the recognition and respect of Southern Cameroons improve or diminish the well-sought security for the American investors? And I say this against the background of the fact that the United States abstained from voting on Resolution 1608, Roman 15. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question. For those of you who don't know the situation in Cameroon, it's right now become in my current role as Assistant Secretary of State, now that Ethiopia has totally changed course, and we can talk a little bit if you'd like about the happenings in Africa right now. But since Ethiopia has totally changed course, Cameroon is the country that I hear more about from members of Congress. Thanks to the activity of the Cameroonian diaspora, by the way, because they definitely let their views be known. So there is, in effect, a civil war going on in the part of Cameroon which formerly was a British colony, because Cameroon had been two former colonies, British and French. They came together, they voted for one country under a federation, but the federation was done away with the Cameroonian president. So now the Anglophones are basically fighting for their rights, which started with very serious complaints, and unfortunately the government of Cameroon has not responded in a way that would assuage the concerns of the Cameroonians. The United States government's policy, and I'll say current policy, is to recognize the current borders of Cameroon. I'll say that's the current policy. As far as energy, something not a lot of people realize, that out of the 54 countries in Africa, there are only 4 that are neither pumping nor searching for oil or gas, which means, as I said before, that it is an incredibly, incredibly rich continent. And it seems, so far, it has been incredibly rich for colonial powers, for the governments in place. It has not been rich for the people who live there. That's something that we desperately have to change. So I know you would want me to give a different answer, but right now I can give you what the U.S. government policy is.
That's fine.
But you know, as I said, we have had so much good news from Africa. Last year, look what's happened in Ethiopia. Look what's happened in the Horn of Africa. Look what's happened in Angola. More recently, look what's happened in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which for the first time in its history may actually become democratic and a republic.
After this one.
And maybe the world's richest country may actually share some of its wealth with its own people. So look what's happened there. Look what happened yesterday in Sudan, with people power overthrowing the corrupt, bloodthirsty regime of President Omar al-Bashir. So I will just say, my next concern is Cameroon. And you know how I feel about hating the violence that's going on there. Thank you very much.
We have a next question this side. One moment, please. Next question, Danny.
Thank you for being with us today, Ambassador. My name is Ebony Fowler, and I'm in the EMPA program. As global warming affects the world, how are we assisting Africa via emergency management and disaster relief?
Yeah, that is a extremely tough question, because, you know, some of the evidence has been showing that the climate change will likely impact Africa more than any other places. And, you know, I'm not a scientist in that regard, but already, if you go to a place like N'Djamena, Chad, in July, you know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's not easy getting around. And the African governments realize that there's going to have to be multilateral negotiations and discussions on that, on the various countries, because you have 2 problems. You have three. You have one, the problems in the interior areas, especially the Sahelian and the Sahara Desert, becoming hyperheated. You have the other problem, questioning what will happen on the coastal areas, because, as we know, a huge proportion of the population lives, you know, within 100 kilometers of the coast. And then the third, that, you know, is not often mentioned, you have a whole series of island nations which technically belong to Africa: the Comoros, the Seychelles, Réunion, Mauritius, Sao Tome and Principe. And some of those islands could actually become, you know, totally covered. So it requires not bilateral, but it requires very, very serious multilateral discussions. Thanks so much for raising that.
My name is Charles Emerson. Thank you, Ambassador, for coming. My question is, what is the role of the USA working in tandem with the EU, most especially France, to see that the stranglehold that France has on its 15 Francophone countries could be loosened, hence the tsunami that you just talked about could be mitigated so that we don't see our vibrant African youth taking the tortuous routes that you talked about? Thank you.
Thanks for asking that. Before I went on I just got back from Central Africa, 5 countries, 3 weeks. And before that, I had a chance to meet up with my group of 7 colleagues, which is basically the richest countries in the world, if you want to be, And interestingly enough, for the first time, all of them, it's basically the United States, Japan, Canada, and the rest are Europeans. But for the first time, there was an incredible amount of concern for the economies of Africa. Now, this is what the Europeans are looking at. Right now, there are about 17 million Europeans who trace their roots to Africa. 17. One estimate is that by 2050, and this is incredible, there'll be 150 million Europeans who will trace their roots to Africa. 150. Now, there's 2 ways you could look at that. My point of view, if somebody on their own initiative makes it across the Sahara Desert and gets to the shores of the Mediterranean, I would hand them a visa and say, welcome, because you're going to be a tremendous benefit to our society if you have that kind of gumption. Another way to look at that is, unfortunately, what a lot of Europe says is, oh my gosh, these people are going to come and totally, change our culture. So initially, the European policy was to try to stop migration on the shores of the Mediterranean. Now the European policy has become to try to stop migration at the roots by developing the countries. So in effect, Africa could use that to its own advantage in attracting so much European development to truly improve their economies. But that's just not an economic consideration, as you guys who study these things know. There's equal amount of politics involved, because you have to have the political leadership in a country to be able to also impact the economy. So we'll see how it goes. I personally think that there's going to be an awful lot of money going from Europe to Africa. As to how effective it will be, I don't know. Because truly, if you look at the African landscape and find a country that has really kind of done it on its own, without much foreign assistance, I posit to you the very small but very courageous country of Rwanda. They went through hell. We know what they went through in the mid-1990s, the genocide. Some certain European countries being in cahoots with the government that perpetrated the genocide. When it was all said and done, very little assistance came to them. They did it on their own. And you go to Rwanda today and you're amazed at the level of development, at the level of organization, the incredibly low level of corruption. It's one of the few countries where you see somebody in a uniform, you think they're actually going to help you, not abuse you or hit you up for a bribe. So Carnegie Mellon University has a branch campus now in Rwanda offering the same master's degrees they offer in Pittsburgh, only at a much lower cost. So if I was going for a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon today, I would go and do it in Rwanda, not in Pittsburgh. They're focusing on the future digital economy. They're converting their farming, agricultural sector into modern industry farming. And they did that all on their own. But they had a government which did not tolerate corruption. So to me, the critical element is the political working together with the economic.
I hope everyone has had a chance to write their questions.
And I'm sorry, I'm not going to get to all of them either. So, but I do answer emails. Sir.
Yeah, my question is regarding policies. in organizations such as OECD, Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development. Can you just comment on their impact on addressing poverty, hunger, and healthcare in Africa, as well as in the underserved ghetto areas in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned before, there are two types of assistance. One is the humanitarian, where you're responding to a bona fide emergency, whether it's human created like a war. Other would be like this huge hurricane was just hit Mozambique, where you absolutely have to have outside assistance to mitigate the disaster. The other, the economic development, I have to tell you, I am not a fan of, and I'll tell you why. Since the time I've been engaged in Africa, I have gone through, in my experience, like 4 or 5 different theories of development. They keep changing dramatically, and I'm ashamed that it was only like in 2000 where finally they got to the point there, oh, you know, we're going to do development. Maybe we should talk first to the people whose lives we're going to impact instead of deciding what's good for them. So that's why I am a true proponent, again, based on my experience, not any kind of philosophy, that the way to develop an area, and I don't care if it's a country, a zone, a city, is through putting down the groundwork where the private sector is willing to come in. I'll give you just a couple of examples. I was up in New York for the United Nations General Assembly in September. And there was an investor forum by the president of Angola, President Lorenzo. When he took power, what was it, Chuka, a year and a half, 2 years? Yeah. You know, everybody thought that he was just an appendage of the old corrupt dictator. They didn't give him much credit. But lo and behold, he's cut the string, and now he's undertaken a genuine from-the-heart anti-corruption campaign. He's actually going against the old dictator's family in a way that no one would have believed it. Well, they have an investor forum. Not only is there standing room only, there's no room only. You have to use your elbows to get in there. That's how popular the thing was, because the politics and the governance matters. That to me is the key, because the money is there. As a matter of fact, I went to an investor breakfast. This was President Kagame of Rwanda and President of Ghana. And there was all the leading U.S. companies were there, the multi-billion-dollar companies. And somebody spoke up and said, please, the U.S. economy's been rolling. You know, we have so much money that we want to invest. Give us a place to invest it. You know, and again, it can be a country, it can be a zone, but it can be a city. It can be East Baltimore. You know, it can be Philadelphia. Get good, honest government in there, and that will roll in. Thank you.
Okay, we only have opportunity for 2 more questions. So if you could please reach out to me.
I get 1 student.
Okay, we'll get 1 more student. And if you can reach out to me, I'll give all my information and I'll forward all the questions so that you can have an answer.
Thank you.
And please keep your remarks brief.
Okay.
We have only 2 minutes left.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador, for being here today. I share the background of being a refugee as well. I came here as a refugee from Sudan, Darfur, genocide survivor as well. So as you know, President Bashir was asked yesterday, but it was internal coup d'etat. So there's nothing new coming. Same people are repeating the same thing again. After 30 years from the dictatorship, 302,000 people in Darfur were killed, thousands of women were raped, 4,000 villages were burned down, 3 million people were displaced. That's a huge. Now, what happened yesterday is not acceptable. Sudanese people were chanting Salam, Hurriya, Salam, Adala, which is freedom, justice, and peace, and they haven't got that one. What is your U.S. policy towards Sudan? That's my question.
I love the question. Did you see the statement we just issued today?
I did.
Okay, that's just step 1. Because the government that took over is headed by a person who has also been sanctioned and is under charges from the International Criminal Court. So we cannot tolerate that person staying in power. Okay? So we're going to move forward from that. So I'm said that was step one. Stay tuned for step two. Okay?
No, hold on, no. We have one more question right here.
Last question from the students,
From
sorry.
the students. Only last question right here. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ruth. I'm a second-year student here at Texas Southern University. Well, I just had a question. I heard everything you said, and I actually definitely agree. I'm actually Nigerian myself. But I wanted to ask, you talked about various issues that all of our countries obviously face, but how do you expect to truly make an impact? Because I know one thing, and I can speak for Nigeria, the way to fix Africa, or the way to fix Nigeria, is to get into the mind of Nigerians. So you not being like an African, how do you expect to truly make the impact that you want to make and make it stay and make maintenance happen? Because I think that's part of our problem as well too. We don't have maintenance. So for people like me who is very passionate about our countries and want to go back and want to fix and want to be able to go back to a country that's sustainable, such as the one we're in, how do you expect to do that?
I am so glad to hear you use that word. You are so passionate about your country. Because at the end of the day, you know where the solution comes from? When the young people in their own countries care more about their countries than the international community. When hundreds of thousands of people go out in Algiers, the old man goes away. You know, and I know it was just step one in Khartoum, but it's going to happen there. It happened in Ethiopia, not quite as dramatically, but again, it was the young people who did it. And all over the continent are all these young people, and they're not going to tolerate it anymore. They are going to care. When you have leaders that are 4 times as old as their population, I'm sorry, I'm an old person too, but there's something wrong there, you know? So that's going to happen. It's the international community can assist. The international community can support. But I got so sick and tired during my diplomatic time when people would come up to me and say, oh, America must fix this. It's not going to be America that fixes it. It's people like you who say, I am passionate about my country. So God bless you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.